Okay, in the last video we created a table, and I just created the movies table. I also ran my script, if you'll recall, that created the AdventureWorks table as well. And now we're going to focus on doing some data manipulation, which means creating records. They call them items in DynamoDB. So creating and querying them in order to retrieve that data based on giving it the key. We'll do more sophisticated queries later on, doing an update, changing, and deleting items as well. And I'm also going to be deleting a table. You can delete a table as well. So these slides from 22 to 26 are what we're going to be focusing on in this video. So let me pull up the shell again. So I've just pulled up the shell. It's empty. So I'm going to go through that same process again of importing Boto3 and setting up my client. And the only reason I need the client, the Boto3 client, is to list tables. I want to be able to see what tables I have at this point. Client equals Boto3.client using the DynamoDB service. And then also resource. That's going to be more important for doing a lot of other things. Equal Boto3.resource, again for DynamoDB. So I've got those. Let me do a client list tables. And now I see that I have two tables, AW product BOM, because I ran my script, and movies. I don't want the AW product BOM. I'm going to get that table, and I'm going to delete it. I'm going to get rid of that table. And you can actually do that using something similar to what I had shown you before. Let me go back to that. Here is a line. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste it in there. And so now that I have it, if I look at what table it is this table. It is an instance of DynamoDB.table, and the name of it is AW product BOM, and I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to say table.delete. So now I no longer have that. This was basically just the response of doing the delete. You can see it's deleting. And now if I wanted to see my tables, I will see that the only table I have left is the movies table that I had done before. Okay, so let's continue with this, and we'll experiment with manipulating data, and we'll use some of the features that we're seeing in these slides. So there's a put item, which is equivalent to your insert. There is a get item, which is equivalent to a select, but it's very specific. It's only selecting based on the key. We'll do more sophisticated queries in another video. There's the update. You give it the key value, and then you specify what you're going to do to update it. And then there's a delete. So let's start with this first one, this put item. And let me just copy this text here. Now, this slide here is doing it with respect to the AdventureWorks database. So I'm going to basically take this, I'm going to copy it into my shell, but I'm going to change it because we're working with this movie database. I'm going to copy this statement right here, which is saying I'm going to assign into my variable this particular table. Of course, that table doesn't exist anymore, but instead I'm going to do the movies one. And if I look at table, and if I look at more detail about the table, and let me go back again to a previous slide to show you what I'm doing here. If I want to get the attribute definitions, so I think I'm going to get the attribute definitions for this table, and recall that there was title and there was year. So I'm going to, and title was a string, and year was a number. So I'm going to make a slight change to this put, to this insert statement, to this thing that's an equivalent to a SQL insert statement. And of course, I can't do it this way because if I try to put that in, it's going to give an error because there is no such thing as a product ID or a product name. So let me just change that a little bit, and we'll call it title, and I'll call it my movie, and we'll call it year, and I have to give it a number, so I'll give it 2020. And now I'm going to do it, and you will see that it's done that insert. As a matter of fact, if I was to well, I don't know if it's going to catch it right away. I've noticed that sometimes it doesn't catch it right away, but let me see if I can say client list, no, not client list tables. I wanted to do table, and I wanted to see how many items there are. And that was, we saw this type table item count. Let me see if it caught it. I've noticed that sometimes it doesn't catch it right away. It still says 0, but there is, in fact, a record in there. But if I got out of the shell and got back into it, it would show that there was an item count. For some reason, the item counts I've noticed with AWS is that maybe they're refreshing periodically or something like that. It's kind of odd. But there is definitely a record in there. There's definitely an item in there because we just inserted an item. Let's take a look at the code here, a little bit detail. And I'll also look at it in the slide. So this is what you're going to be doing. But let's take a look at something. Number one, when I am going to put a record into the database, I have to specify the values of the key for sure. But notice what else I've done here. I've also given a value for another attribute that was not even defined. Looking at the actual data definition, that we can see attribute definitions. There's no such attribute called other. And this is another example then of how we don't worry much about metadata when we're creating our table. We only worry about it when we're populating it and when we're using it. So despite the fact that we don't have an explicit field defined called other stuff, this particular item does have an attribute, other stuff, and it does have a value, and we're going to see that. So let me go to the slide for getting an item. So I'm going to go ahead and do something similar to what you're going to be doing in your code. I'm going to copy this. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste it into the shell. So this is the get item method call. And again, I don't want to have product ID and product name. I'm going to have title because that was part of the key. And what was the title? The title was my movie. So let me go ahead and copy that. And also part of the key was the year. So this will be year. And the year was, for this particular record, 2020. So the unique identifier for that record that we just created was my movie in 2020. And if I want to do a get item on that, and what's happening is that is going to go into a variable called response. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I got an error. I didn't get an error. So if I want to see what the response shows, what the response has, here I have it. And notice what the item has. The item has an other stuff property or attribute, as well as a year and a title. And this is a dictionary. This response is a dictionary, so it's key value pair. So if I wanted to say response and then item, that is the item itself. Because the response had a lot of stuff. The response had what was the request and when was it sent and all these kinds of things. All this stuff is just about the response in general. But the item, that's the record that was returned. And I could actually go a step further because even item, response item, is also a dictionary, as you can see, and it has these properties. So if I wanted to see response item, say year, that's the year. If I wanted to see response item and I wanted to see other stuff, and that's the other stuff. So what we've done so far is we put a new item into the database, what I should say, a new record into that table, the movies table of the database, of this DynamoDB database. We've also been able to retrieve that item and display results. I can make a change to an item. So let me go ahead and do something like that with the movie table. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And let's look at the syntax for this. It's kind of cumbersome. Again, I wanted to make sure that I've got title, and title is my movie. And I'm going to have year, and year was 2020. And notice that there is an update expression, kind of similar in syntax to what you have with an update statement in SQL. Set, the field name equals, and then a particular value. And the way that that value is being expressed is with this expression attribute value. So the name of it, val, and the value is going to be 1,000. So basically, we are going to be changing this table's other stuff field, if you will, to have 1,000 instead. And this is the result that comes from the update item. So I'll do a get again, and I'll put that into a new variable called response2, so I can compare response, which was the original query, versus response2. And if I wanted to say then response to other stuff, I can see it's 1,000. So that's what's actually in the database now. The original response, I had it in a variable still. That's still the 70. But what's actually in the database now is this item that has an other stuff value of 1,000. So that's the update. And finally, I can do a delete, and I'm going to do a delete for that record. So I'm going to delete that item. And again, I'm going to make it title, my movie, and year 2020. And it should delete it. And now, if I wanted to try to, I'll do response 3 now. So we're going to try to see what's in that record now. And if I say response 3, I don't have any items there. As a matter of fact, if I said response 3 item, I'm going to get an exception because it doesn't exist. So response 3, it did the query, it attempted to get the record didn't exist, and so we can see that there is no such record. So we deleted that record. Let me do one more time, client list tables. We still have that table, but now if I was to say, and let's see what that table was again. That table was this table movies. If I say table.delete, it's deleting the entire table now. So now if I say client.listTables, I got no tables in my database. So For your next script file, now that you've created a script file, you have to have first created the script file for actually creating your AdventureWorks BOM database, table, I should say. And now you're going to do a script file that's going to populate and display data. So let me run mine. First, I'm going to have to create that table, that DynamoDB table again. So I'm going to pull up my create one. So here was the create one. I showed you that last time. And then I have another one that I call manipulate table data. So you're going to make another script called manipulate table data yourself. It looks something like this. And let me go ahead. I'm going to kill this script right here. Let me go ahead and run this one again. This was the create. And this was the output that we expected from the create. And again, if I was to say, what does table have? It is that AW product BOM. And then as a result of doing the code that's in your PowerPoint, essentially, and copying it and pasting it into a new script file. So this will be your second script file. This manipulate one. Let me go ahead and run that one. And the output of this code should say something like this. So what's happening? First, I'm putting a new item. I prompted and said that. Then I'm getting and displaying it. So this is displaying the whole item and displaying only one attribute of it. This is updating it, where I change the value, and then after the update, I'm again doing a display of the item. And you can see that the value of other stuff has changed. And then I'm deleting it. And after I delete it, I do the get. And here, when I'm trying to print it, I expect to get an error because the item doesn't exist. So that's what I want your script to have. So you got two script files now to work on. One for creating the table, and one for doing some data manipulation of the table. Creating a record, retrieving that record, updating it, and deleting it. And in the end, of course, what you're going to wind up with is just your AdventureWorks database, but it will be empty at the end because you've deleted the record. But you've created it as well before deleting it. So that's it for now, and next time we're going to dive into working with that JSON data and really do something meaty with this thing.